The salvage drone moved slowly through the floating debris, its metal arms reaching out to grab pieces of ancient ships and broken satellites. The graveyard ring was the largest junkyard in the galaxy, a massive belt of garbage that circled a dying red star. Millions of years of space travel had left behind mountains of broken technology, and the consortium made good money picking through it all. Tors watched the drone's camera feed from her workstation inside the salvage station. She was one of only 12 humans working in this sector, a young technician who had taken the job because it paid well and kept her far away from the crowded colony worlds. The work was boring most days, just sorting through junk and cataloging anything that might be worth selling. But today was different. The drone had found something buried deep in a section of debris that the scanners said was over 400 years old. It looked like an escape pod, the kind humans used centuries ago, but the markings on its surface were strange. They glowed with a faint blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Overseer stood behind, his 4 eyes narrowing as he studied the image. It was tall and thin, with gray skin that shifted colors when he was thinking hard. He had been running this station for 60 years and had seen many strange things come out of the junkyard. This was stranger than most. "Bring it in," he ordered. "Full containment protocols. I want it scanned before we open it." The drone carried the pod back to the station, and within an hour it was sitting in the main cargo bay, stood with a team of workers as the scanners ran their tests. The results made no sense. The pod was definitely human technology, matching designs from the early 2400s, but the markings were not human. They were not or any other known species. The computer said the symbols belonged to no civilization in its database. "There is something inside," one of the technicians reported, "biological, still alive." Made a sound of disbelief. "That pod has been floating out there for over 4 centuries. Nothing could survive that long." "The readings are clear, Overseer. There is a living human inside." Felt her heart beat faster. A living human, frozen in time for 400 years. She had heard stories about lost ships and stranded survivors, but nothing like this. She stepped closer to the pod as the team prepared to open it. The seal broke with a hiss of escaping air, and cold mist poured out onto the floor, waved it away and looked inside. A man lay there, dressed in a military uniform that looked ancient. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful, as if he was simply sleeping. The name on his uniform read Cole. Then his eyes opened. He gasped and sat up, grabbing the edges of the pod with hands that shook from cold and confusion. His eyes moved around the cargo bay, taking in the alien faces and unfamiliar technology. "Where am I?" he demanded. "What happened to my ship?" Stepped forward, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. "You are safe. You are on a salvage station in the graveyard ring. My name is Tors. What is your name?" The man stared at her for a long moment. "Cole, Commander, United Earth Navy. I was stationed on the Constellation." He looked around again, his confusion growing. "We were under attack. The fleet had us surrounded. I ordered the crew to abandon ship, and then there was a bright light and I heard a voice, and then I was here." Felt a chill run down her spine. "Commander Cole, what year do you think it is?" 2435. "April, I think, maybe May. The battle happened on April 28th. Exchanged a look with. The overseer's skin had turned a pale shade of gray, which meant he was deeply troubled. "Commander," said gently, "the current year is 2847. You have been drifting in space for over 400 years." Cole's face went white. He gripped the edge of the pod so hard that his knuckles turned pale. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at as if waiting for her to tell him it was a joke. But she did not laugh. No one laughed. "That is impossible," he finally said. "A human cannot survive 400 years in an escape pod. The life support would fail within weeks. The food and water would run out." "And yet here you are," said, stepping forward. "Alive and breathing. Our medical scans confirm you are human, but your cells show patterns we have never seen before. You should be dead, Commander. Everything we know about biology says you should have died centuries ago." Climbed out of the pod on unsteady legs. Moved to help him, and he accepted her arm without protest. He was taller than her by a head, with broad shoulders and the posture of a man who had spent his life in military service. "I remember the battle," he said quietly. "The Constellation was hit by multiple torpedoes. The reactor was failing. I got as many crew members as I could to the escape pods, but there were not enough for everyone. I was the last one on the bridge when the ship started to break apart." He paused, his eyes distant. There was a light, not from the explosion, something else. It was everywhere, all around me, inside me, and there was a voice. What did the voice say? Asked. Looked at her with eyes that seemed suddenly very old. It said I had been chosen. It said humanity would need me. He shook his head. I thought I was dying. I thought it was just my brain shutting down and showing me fantasies. Studied the strange markings on the pod. These symbols belong to no species we know. They are ancient, perhaps millions of years old. We will need to consult the archives. Walked to a nearby console and looked at the star map displayed on the screen. Where was my pod found? Show me. Pulled up the coordinates. The pod had been recovered from a dense cluster of debris near the outer edge of the graveyard ring. Stared at the map for a long time. Then he pointed to a spot on the far side of the display, over 60,000 light-years away. That is where the constellation was destroyed, he said. Right there, in the border zone. I know because I watched the star chart on the bridge until the moment everything went dark. The cargo bay fell silent. 60,000 light-years. Even the fastest ships in the galaxy would take decades to cover that distance. For an escape pod with no engine, it would be completely impossible. Commander Cole said slowly, how did you get from there to here? Turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw fear mixed with something else. Something that looked almost like understanding. I do not know, he said, but I think someone wanted me to survive. Someone wanted me to be found. And I think whatever they chose me for is about to begin. 3 weeks passed, and Cole became the most studied human in the sector. Dr. Vance had arrived from a nearby research station within days of his recovery, and she had not stopped running tests since. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had spent her entire career studying how different species survived in extreme conditions. Was the strangest case she had ever seen. Your cells are regenerating at a rate I have never observed in any human, she told him as they sat in her laboratory. Damage that should take weeks to heal is repaired in hours. Your brain activity shows patterns that match deep meditation states, even when you are wide awake. And there is an energy signature in your tissue that does not match anything in our records. Looked at his hands. They looked the same as always, the hands of a soldier who had spent years gripping weapons and ship controls. But he could feel the difference now. When he slept, he dreamed of stars being born and dying. He heard whispered voices speaking in languages that should have been meaningless but somehow made sense. I am still human, he said. It was almost a question. Nodded slowly. Yes, everything that makes you human is still there, but something else has been added, something we do not understand yet. Tours had become guide to the modern world. She spent hours each day teaching him about the 4 centuries he had missed, the wars that had been fought and won, the colonies that had spread across the galaxy, the alliances that had formed between humans and alien species who had once been enemies. The galaxy had changed completely, but humans were still humans. They still built things and broke things and fought over things that did not matter. That much, at least, was familiar. One morning, took to meet someone she said might have answers. His name was Morn, and he was a scholar who maintained the archives of the salvage station. They were an ancient species, their civilization older than most stars in this region of space. Morn himself was over 800 years old, his body bent with age but his mind still sharp. His archive was a massive room filled with data crystals and holographic displays showing records from 1,000 different civilizations. Many of those civilizations no longer existed, wiped out by war or disaster, or simply fatting away over millions of years. Morn studied the images of the markings on his pod for a long time. His ancient eyes moved slowly over each symbol, and his breathing grew heavier with each passing moment. I know these marks, he finally said. I have seen them only once before, in records so old that most scholars believe they are myths. What are they? Asked. The old turned to face him. They are the language of the architects, a civilization that existed 3 million years ago, before most current species had even evolved. They were the oldest and most powerful beings the galaxy has ever known. They seeded life on countless worlds, guided the development of young species, and built wonders that we cannot even begin to understand. What happened to them? Morn was quiet for a moment. They vanished. Every record, every trace, every structure they built simply stopped existing overnight. No one knows why. Some say they grew tired of existence and chose to end themselves. Others say they transcended physical form and became something beyond our understanding. But the most troubling theory is that they sacrificed themselves to stop something terrible. Felt the whispered voices in his mind grow louder. Images flashed behind his eyes, too fast to understand but too strong to ignore. They were watching us, he said. The voice told me. It said the architects had been watching humanity since our first steps on Earth. Morn leaned forward, his old eyes suddenly intense. What else did the voice tell you? That we were chosen, that humanity would need me, shook his head. I do not know what it meant. I was dying. I thought it was just a dream. Had been listening quietly. Now she stepped forward with a data pad in her hands. I have been searching through historical records. Commander Cole is not the first human to be recovered this way. Over the past several centuries, at least 17 humans have been found in similar conditions. Ancient escape pods, impossible survival times, strange markings, and cellular changes matching what we see in. Where are they now? Asked. Most have died of old age, but the records show that each one remembered the same things describes: a bright light, a voice, a message about being chosen. Stood up, his body tense. There are others like me, others who heard the voice. Nodded. According to my research, there may be several still alive, scattered across different sectors. Each one was a soldier who died in battle protecting others. Each one should have been killed but somehow survived. Morn made a sound that might have been wonder or fear. The architects did not choose randomly. They chose protectors, warriors who were willing to give their lives for strangers. He looked at with new understanding in his ancient eyes. In all my centuries of study, I have never seen another species produce such individuals in large numbers. Other species fight for territory, for resources, for survival. But humans fight for ideas, for people they have never met, for futures they will never see. That night dreamed again. But this time the dream was clearer. He saw the architects as they had been millions of years ago, tall beings of light and energy who moved through the universe like gods. He saw them building worlds and guiding young species toward the stars. He saw them happy and proud of their work. And then he saw the darkness. It came from outside the galaxy, from the spaces between spaces where nothing should exist. It was not a creature or a fleet or a weapon. It was an absence, a hunger, a void that consumed everything it touched. Stars went dark, worlds crumbled to dust, entire civilizations were erased as if they had never existed. The architects fought back. They built weapons and barriers and shields. They sacrificed themselves by the millions to slow the darkness down. In the end, they gave everything they had to seal the void away, trapping it beyond the edge of reality where it could not reach the galaxy they had worked so hard to fill with life. But the seal was not permanent. Nothing lasts forever. Woke up with tears on his face and a terrible understanding in his heart. The architects had known the seal would eventually fail. They had prepared for that day by choosing inheritors, beings who could finish what they started. They had chosen humanity because humans were the only species willing to stand against the darkness, even when victory was impossible. And now, 400 years after his death, Cole was beginning to understand why he had been brought back. 3 months after Cole woke up in the salvage station, he stood in a room with 11 other humans who should have been dead. They called themselves the Returned, men and women who had died in battles across the centuries and been brought back by a force they did not understand. The meeting took place on a small human colony called Haven's Rest, a quiet world far from the busy trade routes where the Returned could gather without attracting too much attention. Vance had spent weeks tracking them down, following old records and rumors until she found the survivors. There was Dean, a pilot who had crashed his ship into an enemy cruiser to save a refugee convoy over 200 years ago. There was Blake, a medic who had stayed behind to treat wounded soldiers when her base was overrun 3 centuries past. There was Samuel Grant, the oldest of them all, who had held a defensive position alone for 18 hours while civilians escaped through an underground tunnel. Each of them had the same story, a moment of sacrifice, a bright light, a voice speaking of duty and inheritance, and then waking up years or centuries later with fragments of memories that did not belong to them. When they gathered together in the same room for the first time, something remarkable happened. The fragments began to connect. Felt it like puzzle pieces clicking into place inside his mind. Memories that had been confused and scattered suddenly became clear. Images that had been too fast to understand now moved at a speed he could follow. The whispered voices became a single voice, speaking words that finally made sense. The seal is failing, said. The others nodded. They had all seen the same truth. Blake closed her eyes. I see them, the architects. They are showing us what they saw at the end. Dean's hands trembled. The hollow, that is what they called it, not a species or an army, just emptiness, just hunger. Samuel Grant, the oldest of them, spoke in a voice heavy with centuries of experience. They knew we would be needed, not because we are stronger or smarter than other species, because we are stubborn, because we do not know when to quit. Tors had come with to the gathering. She was not one of the returned, but had asked her to be there. Over the past months, she had become his closest friend in this strange new time, the one person who treated him like a human being instead of a miracle or a mystery. She watched the returned with wonder and fear in her eyes. What do the architects want you to do? Looked at his fellow survivors. In their faces, he saw the same determination he felt in his own heart. They had all been soldiers once. They had all made the choice to die for others. Now they were being asked to make that choice again, but on a scale that dwarfed anything they had ever imagined. They want us to finish what they started, he said. The hollow is waking up. The seal that has kept it contained for 3 million years is breaking down. When it fails completely, the hollow will consume everything. Every star, every world, every living thing in the galaxy. How do we stop it? Asked. She had come to the meeting as a scientist, but could see that she was ready to become something more if needed. Before anyone could answer, an alarm rang through the building. Pulled out her communication device, and her face went pale as she read the message. Something has happened at the edge of known space, she said. A border station went silent 2 hours ago. The last transmission shows the stars going dark. The room fell into shocked silence. Dean pulled up a star map on the main display. The location of the border station was marked with a red indicator. As they watched, another station went dark, then another. It has begun, Samuel Grant said quietly. Felt the weight of 400 years pressing down on him. He had been given a second chance at life, and now he understood why. The architects had not saved him out of kindness. They had saved him because they needed soldiers who would not run, who would not surrender, who would stand against the darkness until the very end. We need to warn the fleet, he said. We need to warn everyone. Admiral Gregory Shaw arrived at Haven's Rest 2 days later with a small fleet of human warships. He was a hard man with gray hair and suspicious eyes, and he did not believe a word of what the return told him. You expect me to accept that an ancient civilization chose humans to save the galaxy based on dreams and visions? The Admiral shook his head. I have seen many things in my career, Commander Cole. I have fought battles across a dozen systems, but I have never seen evidence of these architects you describe. The evidence is spreading across the border right now, replied. 6 stations have gone dark. 3 colony worlds have stopped responding. You can dismiss our story, Admiral, but you cannot dismiss what is happening out there. Shaw stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to look at the star map, where the zone of darkness was slowly growing larger. Even if I believed you, he said slowly, what would you have me do? We do not have weapons capable of fighting something that eats stars. The architects left weapons behind, Blake said. We have seen them in our visions. Installations hidden across the galaxy, waiting to be found and activated. And how do we find these installations? Stepped forward. We already know where one of them is. The visions have been guiding us. There is an architect facility on a human colony world called New Providence, buried deep beneath the surface. It has been waiting there for 3 million years. Admiral Shaw studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or madness. He found neither. He found only the steady gaze of a soldier who had already died once for his duty and was prepared to do so again. I have read your service record, Commander Cole, the Admiral finally said. You were decorated for bravery 6 times. You saved your crew at the cost of your own life. Everything in that record tells me you are a man of honor. I am, said, and I am telling you the truth. The hollow is coming, and we are the only ones who can stop it. Not because we are special, but because we are willing to try when everyone else would give up. Shaw turned back to the star map. The darkness had claimed 2 more systems while they talked. Somewhere out there, billions of lives were being erased from existence. Very well, he said. I will take my fleet to New Providence, but if we find nothing there, Commander, this conversation is over. Nodded. He knew they would find what they were looking for. The architects had planned this moment for 3 million years. They had chosen humanity because humans never stopped fighting, even when all hope was gone. Now it was time to prove them right. New Providence was a beautiful world of green forests and blue oceans, home to nearly 50 million humans who had built a peaceful civilization far from the troubles of the inner colonies. Governor Carroll met, and the Admiral at the main spaceport with confusion on her face. An ancient alien installation beneath our planet, she shook her head. We have been here for 200 years. Our surveys would have found something like that. The architects built things that our technology cannot detect, explained. The installation will only reveal itself to those who were chosen to find it. The governor was clearly skeptical, but Admiral Shaw had already shown her the footage from the border stations. The darkness spreading across the stars was not something that could be ignored or explained away. Whatever was happening out there, it was real, and it was coming closer every day. They traveled by ground transport to a valley in the northern continent, a place that had always been considered unremarkable by the colonists. Felt the pull growing stronger as they approached, a sensation in his chest that guided him like a compass pointing north. When they reached the center of the valley, he stopped walking and placed his hand on the ground. The earth began to glow. Blue light spread outward from his touch, forming patterns that matched the markings on his escape pod. The ground trembled and shifted, and slowly, impossibly, a structure began to rise from beneath the soil. It was massive, a tower of crystal and metal that climbed toward the sky until it blocked out the sun. Tor stood beside, her eyes wide with wonder. "It is real," she whispered. "Everything you told us is real." The entrance to the tower opened as approached, responding to his presence like a door welcoming home a long-absent owner. Inside, the walls glowed with soft light, and the air hummed with energy that had been waiting for 3 million years to be used. At the center of the main chamber, a figure appeared. It was not solid, more like a hologram made of light and shadow. It had no face that could recognize, but somehow he knew it was looking at him. "You have come," the figure said. Its voice echoed in his mind rather than his ears. "The inheritors have finally arrived." "What are you?" Governor demanded. "I am what remains of those who built this place. A fragment of consciousness preserved to guide you when the time came. You may call me the voice." "Step forward. The hollow is breaking free. The seal is failing. We have seen it in our visions." The voice pulsed with what might have been sadness. "Yes, we knew this day would come, though we hoped it would take longer. The hollow is not a creature that can be killed or an army that can be defeated. It is an absence, a force that exists by consuming existence itself. When it touches something, that thing simply stops being." "How did you stop it before?" Admiral Shaw asked. "We sacrificed ourselves. Billions of my kind gave their lives to create a barrier that pushed the hollow beyond the edge of reality. But such barriers cannot last forever. They weaken over time. And we knew that eventually, someone would need to strengthen the seal or create a new one." "Why us?" asked. "Why did you choose humans?" The voice turned to face her, and felt something like warmth radiating from the ancient presence. "We watched many species develop over the millions of years since we departed. We studied them, learned their strengths and weaknesses, searched for those who might carry on our work. Most species are rational. They calculate odds and make decisions based on what benefits them. When faced with impossible situations, they surrender or flee. It is the logical response." The voice paused, and when it spoke again, there was something like wonder in its tone. "Humans are different. Your species contains individuals who will fight when there is no hope of victory, who will sacrifice themselves for strangers they will never meet, who will stand against the darkness not because they believe they can win, but simply because someone must stand. We searched the galaxy for 3 million years and found no other species with this quality in such abundance." Thought of all the soldiers he had served with, men and women who had volunteered for dangerous missions knowing they might not return. He thought of firefighters running into burning buildings and doctors staying to treat patients during plagues. He thought of ordinary people who became heroes in moments of crisis, not because they were special, but because they chose to be. "We are not all like that," he said quietly. "Many humans are selfish and cruel." "Yes," the voice agreed, "but enough of you are not. Enough of you carry the spark of irrational hope that defies calculation. That is why we chose your kind. That is why we preserved those among you who best represented that quality." Admiral Shaw had been examining the walls of the chamber, where displays showed maps of the galaxy and the spreading zone of darkness. You mentioned strengthening the seal. How do we do that? The voice gestured, and a section of the floor opened to reveal a platform holding objects that looked like crystalline spheres. These are the weapons we created. Each one contains the power to tear at the fabric of the hollow, to push it back and strengthen the barrier that contains it. There are caches like this one hidden across the galaxy, waiting to be found. Vance approached the spheres with the careful curiosity of a scientist. How do they work? They require a pilot, someone who must carry the weapon into the heart of the hollow and activate it there. The process cannot be done remotely or by machine. It requires a conscious choice, a willing sacrifice, because the act of choosing is itself part of the power. The room fell silent as everyone understood what the voice was saying. You are asking us to die, said. I am asking you to choose. The architects could not make this choice. We calculated the odds and despaired. We could only seal the hollow away because we finally found the courage to stop calculating. But that courage was not natural to us. It took us millions of years to develop it, and by then we had lost too many to fight effectively. The voice moved closer too, its form flickering with ancient emotion. Humans do not need millions of years. You are born with the capacity for irrational sacrifice. You can look at impossible odds and choose to fight anyway. That is your gift. That is why you are here. Looked at the returned who had gathered behind him. He saw the same resolve in their faces that he felt in his own heart. They had already died once for others. They had already proven what they were willing to give. How many weapons are there? He asked. Thousands, scattered across the galaxy. But the largest and most powerful is here. It is capable of resealing the breach completely, but it must be carried into the heart of the hollow itself. Stepped onto the platform and picked up one of the crystalline spheres. It was warm in his hands, alive with energy that responded to his touch. Then we know what we have to do, he said. He turned to face the others. I am not going to ask anyone to follow me. This is not an order, but I am going into that darkness and I am going to finish what the architects started. Stepped forward first. I am coming with you. Then Dean and Blake and Samuel Grant and all the other returned. One by one, humans stepped forward to volunteer for a mission that most of them would not survive. Admiral Shaw watched them with something like pride in his old eyes. I will bring the fleet, he said. Whatever support you need, you will have it. Governor nodded slowly. New Providence will provide supplies and personnel. If this is truly the end of everything, then we will not sit idle while others fight for us. Felt the weight of 3 million years of planning settle onto his shoulders. The architects had believed in humanity. They had seen something in his species that was worth preserving, worth fighting for. Now it was time to prove them right. The fleet gathered at the edge of the darkness, a collection of ships from a dozen different species. Human warships formed the core of the formation, but they were joined by cruisers and transports and vessels from species that had been enemies just months before. The spreading void had done what centuries of diplomacy could not. It had united the galaxy against a common threat. Cole stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars that were slowly going dark. The hollow was close now, a wall of emptiness that swallowed light and matter and everything else it touched. Ships that ventured too close simply stopped existing, erased from reality as if they had never been. Overseer had come with the fleet. He stood beside now, his gray skin pale with fear but his 4 eyes steady with determination. I did not believe you when you first woke up, they said. I thought you were just another human confused and lost. I was wrong. Nodded. We are all wrong about things sometimes. What matters is what we do when we learn the truth. The voice had provided coordinates for thousands of weapon caches across the galaxy, and teams had been sent to retrieve them all. Now hundreds of ships carried the crystalline spheres, each one piloted by a volunteer who understood what activation would mean. Most of them were human, some were not. The N and others had found volunteers among their own people, individuals who had learned from humanity's example and chosen to stand with them. Admiral Shaw's voice came over the communication system. All ships, this is the Admiral. The hollow has consumed 47 systems. If we do not stop it here, it will reach the core worlds within months. There will be nowhere left to run. Looked at the faces of his crew. Tor sat at the sensor station, her hands steady on the controls. Vance monitored the weapon systems. The other returned were scattered throughout the fleet, each one commanding a ship that would carry a weapon into the darkness. You all know what we are facing, said. You all know what we are being asked to do. I'm not going to make speeches about glory or honor. I'm just going to tell you the truth. The architects chose humanity because we are willing to die for each other. Today we are going to prove them right. The fleet moved forward. The first contact with the Hollow was devastating. Ships that touched the edge of the darkness simply vanished, their crews erased from existence without even a moment to scream. But the weapons worked. When activated, they tore at the fabric of the void, creating ripples of light that pushed the darkness back. Each activation cost a life. Dean was among the first to go. His ship dove into a tendril of darkness that was reaching toward a refugee convoy, and the crystalline sphere in his hands blazed with light as he made his final choice. The tendril retreated and the convoy escaped, but Dean was gone. Blake followed minutes later, her ship intercepting a wave of emptiness that threatened to engulf a hospital ship full of wounded. She smiled as she activated her weapon, thinking of all the patients she had saved over her long career. Samuel Grant, the oldest of the returned, held a section of the line for nearly an hour before the darkness finally closed around him. His last transmission was a simple message: "It has been an honor." One by one, the volunteers made their sacrifices. Human and alien alike, they flew into the void and chose to give everything they had. Each death pushed the Hollow back a little further. Each sacrifice strengthened the barrier that kept the darkness contained. But it was not enough. Watch the battle from his bridge, coordinating the fleet and directing reinforcements to the weakest points of the line. The Hollow was too vast, too hungry. For every section they pushed back, another broke through somewhere else. "We are losing," said quietly. "There are too few weapons and too much darkness." Looked at the crystalline sphere sitting beside his command chair. It was the largest of the weapons, the one the voice had said could reseal the breach completely. But to use it, someone would have to carry it into the heart of the Hollow, to the very center of the void where the original seal had been created. No one had volunteered for that mission. They all knew that whoever went would not be coming back. The heart of the Hollow was not a place where sacrifice meant death. It was a place where sacrifice meant being erased so completely that you would never have existed at all. Picked up the sphere. It was warm in his hands, pulsing with energy that seemed to recognize him. "No," his voice was sharp with fear. He turned to face her. "Someone has to do it. The architects chose us because we would make this choice. They believed in humanity. They believed in me." "Then let me come with you." Shook his head. "You need to stay here. The fleet needs someone to lead them home when this is over. The galaxy needs people who remember what happened here, who can tell the story of what we did." He walked to her station and took her hands in his. "I have been dead for 400 years. I have been given more time than I ever should have had. Let me use it for something that matters." Tears ran down her face, but she did not argue. She understood just as he understood. This was what it meant to be human. This was the quality the architects had seen in their species. Returned to his command chair and opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Commander Cole. I am taking the primary weapon into the heart of the Hollow. All ships are to fall back to a safe distance once I am through." Admiral Shaw's voice came back immediately. "Commander, there must be another way." "There is not." The voice explained it clearly. "The seal can only be restored from inside. Someone has to make the choice." Paused, thinking of everyone who had ever stood between darkness and those who could not protect themselves. "The architects saved me for this moment. They saw something in humanity that no other species possessed. Today I am going to show them they were right." He piloted his ship away from the fleet, toward the swirling center of the void where the darkness was deepest. Around him, the stars went out one by one, but he did not look back. He thought of his crew on the constellation, the people he had died saving 400 years ago. He thought of all the soldiers throughout history who had made the same choice he was making now. The voice spoke in his mind one last time. "You have exceeded our hopes, Cole, you and all your kind. The galaxy will remember what humanity did here." "Just make sure the seal holds this time," replied. He reached the center of the Hollow. Reality itself seemed to shatter around him, breaking apart into fragments of light and shadow that swirled like leaves in a storm. The hunger of the void pressed against his mind, trying to erase him before he could complete his mission. But Cole did not stop. He held the crystalline sphere against his chest and thought of and all the others who were counting on him. He thought of the billions of lives that would be saved if he succeeded. He thought of what it meant to be human. The sphere blazed with light, brighter than any star, and Cole made his final choice. The darkness screamed. Outside the hollow, the fleet watched as a wave of light exploded from the heart of the void. It spread outward in all directions, pushing the darkness back, compressing it, forcing it into a space smaller and smaller until it finally collapsed into nothing. The stars that had gone dark flickered back to life. The ships that had been lost remained gone, but no more would follow them. The seal was restored. Cole was gone. 6 months later, Torres returned to the salvage station in the Graveyard Ring. She had been promoted to a leadership position in the new Galactic Defense Council, the organization created to ensure humanity and its allies would never be caught unprepared again. But she still came back to the junkyard whenever she could, searching through the debris for any sign of hope. One morning, a salvage drone found something floating in a newly discovered section of the ring. It was an escape pod, covered in markings that glowed with faint blue light. Ran to the cargo bay, her heart pounding with impossible hope. The seal broke with a hiss of escaping air. Cold mist poured out onto the floor, and inside the pod, Cole opened his eyes. "Commander Cole," she said through tears, "according to our records, you have been dead for exactly 412 years. Welcome back." Looked at her and smiled. The voice had one more message. "The seal will hold for another 3 million years, but we should be ready just in case." Helped him out of the pod. Around them, the salvage station hummed with activity, full of humans and aliens working together to build a better future. "There is much to do," said. Nodded, "Then let us get started."